First things first, like I said, Cowboys versus Eagles. Right now, the Philadelphia Eagles are favored in this game by 8.5 points. Again, this game is in Philadelphia. They are the reigning champions. They're going to have a Super Bowl ceremony. All of them already got their rings, but they're going to be putting up the banner this week. Let's talk about this matchup. There's certain things that I'm curious about when it comes to this game, and I think these factors are what could lead to either the Cowboys winning or the Eagles winning this game. Can Dallas stop the run? Jerry Jones, when he traded Micah Parsons, he went into a press conference, and one of the first things he talked about was the fact that he traded Micah Parsons because they couldn't stop the run. They needed more of a run defense, and Micah Parsons was not helping them out from that perspective. And so Jerry Jones added tackle Clark to their roster in order to help bolster stopping the run. Right? So that's reason number one. The other and most obvious factor when it comes to why it's important for Dallas to stop the run game is the fact that they're going up against Saquon Barkley. Right? Saquon Barkley was the rushing leader last year. He had over 2,000 yards. The other aspect of this, and when diving into this, I will say Jerry Jones is right in one factor, and that's the fact that they do struggle at stopping the run. Right, the Cowboys gave up 2,300 yards on the ground last year. So think about that. If you were a team and you played the Cowboys every single week, you would have broken the rushing record in the NFL with 2,300 yards. Right, so giving up 2,300 yards, that's like saying, hey, we just created the best running back in the NFL that plays against us every single week. Now, Saquon Barkley against the Cowboys, he's had a 67-yard game, and then he had a 167-yard game against the Cowboys. The last game against the Cowboys is where he had 167 yards. So he clearly has seen success against this run defense. And so, again, for me, if Dallas wants to have any shot at winning this game, they're going to need to be able to stop the run in this game. Now, another interesting aspect and something that I'm going to be looking for in this game is, do the Eagles have a Super Bowl hangover? Again, they're hanging the banner. They talked about this. Apparently the Eagles team, the players are not even going to be out there for the banner, which I think to me is a good sign that they're just trying to focus on this season. They've probably already celebrated the Super Bowl a lot, and they're saying, hey, you know what, we're not going to be able to see it. Like, we're just going to be in the locker room, or maybe they're going to be doing some pregame warm-ups. But to me, I think that's a good sign that says, hey, we are focused on this year. Last year is last year, and we're moving on. The other aspect of this is the fact that, the Eagles did lose a lot of talent. I've talked about this in a previous episode, but, when you lose people like C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Darius Slay, Josh Sweat, those are impact players on your defense. And so you have a pretty good offense that you're going up against, right? I'd say even better than good. The Cowboys' passing game especially could be very dangerous this year. CeeDee Lamb is a perennial wide receiver one in the NFL. 2 years ago, he led the NFL in receptions and yards, and last year, he wasn't that far behind. So to me, having the ability to step up for these younger cornerbacks that they're going to be expecting to have a major role in this game is going to be super important to me. The other aspect is how do the Cowboys passing attack look with Pickens out there? CeeDee Lamb has been the guy for a few years, and he hasn't really had much help around him. And so for me, does this make CeeDee Lamb's life easier, right? Or does he just see less touches? Because there's two different ways that generally I see this happening. It's, when you bring in another star player, either one, it ends up helping your best player. I think the Bengals are a great example of this. They didn't bring someone in, but I believe that Jamar Chase has the ability to have the games he has, because it's so hard to just focus on double teaming him when they have T. Higgins on the other side, right? That's a huge factor in the passing game success that the Bengals have. And so the Cowboys need to find a way to replicate that, because CeeDee Lamb, like I said, he had 101 receptions and 1,200 yards last year. Like, that's an awesome season, right? You're going to have to essentially repeat that this year if you're the Cowboys, if you want any chance of really being successful. And then on the other side, George Pickens needs to step up and provide even more value, right? I'm not saying he needs to have a 1,200-yard season himself, but if he adds 900, maybe even crazy like 1,000 yards, I don't think that's going to be the case for the Cowboys this year. Maybe it will be because their defense is going to struggle, but again, they need to have that powerful of a passing game in order for the Cowboys to be successful. Because right now, I mean, I'm looking at this rushing, tandem, and I don't have a lot of hope in that group. Right, the Cowboys are coming into this season with two brand new running backs as their main running backs. It's Javonte Williams and it's Miles Sanders, and both of them have never necessarily been the the workhorse, the three down back sort of person. Now they are going to be a tandem, so or a duo, so that's going to help them from that perspective. But still, they're not going to be able to rely on that rushing game to be successful, in my opinion. I think that rushing game is going to really struggle, especially against a very tough Eagles defensive line. The Eagles defensive line is extremely impressive. They've just continuously bolstered it. They did lose Graham, who's a veteran and probably more so of a locker room and leader sort of player in the past couple of years, right? I think his production has definitely fallen, but they've still been able to fill that in with other really good defensive linemen like Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, right? I really think that Jordan Davis is going to have a great season. He's lost a lot of weight. He looks like he's extremely focused on success and working hard this season. And then Jalen Carter is just a game breaker. Jalen Carter, I think, will be talked about so much more this season because of the fact that I think he's going to be great, but also like there's just not going to be as many. There's not a Josh Sweat he's competing with when it comes to pass rushing, right? I think he's going to be potentially an 8, 9, 10 sack, defender this year for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I want to get into a little bit of another interesting factor, and it's really just who do I consider to be the X factors in this game, and I think the first one for the Cowboys is extremely obvious, and it's just purely because his name's been in the media so much, but it's also a huge reason why I mentioned the run game before. Kenny Clark, the defensive tackle for the Cowboys, he's my X factor in this game. If Kenny Clark can stop Saquon Barkley and force the Eagles to focus on their passing game, that's going to be a huge value add for the Cowboys. I think if they're able to stop that run, it really gives them the best shot of winning this game. Because again, Saquon Barkley was the MVP last year, and generally in the first week of the regular season, offenses lag behind on defenses, right? Offenses, it takes a little bit more time to get in sync, to get in a rhythm with each other. And I expect that to happen even with a Super Bowl team like the Philadelphia Eagles. And so if Kenny Clark can take advantage of that, whether it's just miscommunications, lack of communications, missteps, right? Just being a little bit rusty. The Eagles offense didn't necessarily get a lot of work in the preseason. I think they did play in some of the preseason, but this is their first time really getting out there against another opponent in a real game in quite some time, right? Basically the Super Bowl. And so can the Cowboys take advantage of that little bit of that rust and the time that it takes to get up and running? I think that's going to be a huge aspect in what can really make the Cowboys potentially win this game. Again, that's the long shot, but to me, if they're able to stop Saquon Barkley in the run, that gives them the best chance. Now, from the Eagles' perspective, I really have two X factors, and it's because of the fact that I've talked about the Cowboys' passing offense. But to me, Adoree Jackson and Quinyon Mitchell, right, the two corners, those are the people that really need to have a great game for the Eagles in order to just completely handcuff and stop this Cowboys team. Again, the Philadelphia Eagles are favored by 8.5 points. I could see that very easily becoming 14 point spread if they're able to stop the passing offense of the Cowboys. It would be a blowout if they're able to stop CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. For me, again, when it comes to a prediction for this game, I see too much talent on the Philadelphia Eagles side. I truly see the Eagles winning tomorrow night pretty big. To me, I see this game being 28-13.